In my initial presentation, I talked about why Christians shouldn't use birth control because of the ethical and moral implications surrounding it. In this presentation, I'm going to tell you why Christians should use an alternative of what I believe is God's design for family planning, which is natural family planning. Now, we have a lot of lies in culture, and one of the biggest lies is that if you have to use contraceptives inside of marriage, otherwise you're putting your future career, your expectations, your dreams, all of your hopes and aspirations to the chance of roll of dice. Now, we know that's not true because there is an alternative to which culture is trying to serve us. A historically practiced method, not simply a hope and pray mentality, but a scientifically proven and scripturally backed method. Now, contraceptives have, in theory, hijacked God's original intention for marriage by cultivating a lack of trust in God's sovereignty. It's distorted the organic design by not allowing true naked sex. It's encouraged couples to purposefully ignore a lot of the health effects surrounding contraceptives, as well as it's inadvertently permitted the redefining of the family unit by having every family look like non-believers. So let's talk about a little bit of how natural family planning works. Now, it's important to remember that men are always fertile, unlike women who are usually only fertile about 4 to 5 days of the month, depending on the woman. Now, a woman's body gives her natural signals to verify if she is fertile or not, and natural family planning is a safe and easy way to read those signals so that the woman is aware. Now, there are 2 subunits underneath natural family planning. The first is the symptothermal method, or STM. It works in 2 steps. The first step is every morning the woman takes her temperature. This is called the basal body temperature. And when the egg is released, her temperature rises. She can chart that, so when the temperature rises, she'll know she's ovulating or at the maximum time of pregnancy. The second is to detect mucus. And when there's no mucus, or she's dry, she's not fertile. If the texture changes to a sticky texture, she's slightly fertile, approaching ovulation, and when it's an egg white color, she's in full ovulation. As you can see, this picture here depicts that. The second model is called the creatine model, and it's very simple, and pretty much all it is it's a method of tracking for the calendar, and it measures about 14 days since the beginning of her last period to when she would be most fertile. Based on a study by One Flesh, 1,876 couples have found that this method and use was effective. And in the 18-month, 99.5% and 96.4% found that it was effective for them. Now, what's important to remember about this is every time we make a life-altering decision, we need to reflect back on Scripture. But what's really important to remember is to not pick and choose certain verses that meet personal agendas, but to look at the Bible holistically cover to cover. Now, we know that Scripture has historically been used for personal motives, agendas, abusing of people, and people have been confused based on others' justifications of specific verses. For example, there are many Bible-believing Christians that thought Adolf Hitler was justified because they pulled different scriptures about how we need to submit to the government, but then they didn't look at it holistically based on the context of the problem. Another very common example of this is Mary Pride and her quiverful movement, and this is often spoken of when the natural family planning conversation comes up. She bases her movement off of Psalms 127 verses 3 through 5, which talk about blessed is he who has many children. And that's a wonderful concept, and in and of itself is true. However, she takes it to an extreme and says because because the term female is so directly attached to the concept of having children, if a woman is not constantly maximizing that and trying to have as many children as she can, her husband will eventually become gay. Now, I do not agree with that, and I don't think that's correct ideology nor scripturally backed. But we can reflect also in other verses like 1 Timothy 5:8 that says, he is worse than an unbeliever that does not provide for his family. So whenever we look at something like this, we need to consider all scripture. So the argument and point is not that Christians should try to have as many children as they possibly can, but that contraceptives create a false belief that God is not needed, inadvertently glorifying mankind's ability over God's sovereignty. So what's the church's stance on this? Now, I've heard many pastors preach on how we need to trust God with our finances, our futures, our careers, finding their spouses, but I've never heard them talk about we need to trust God for when we have children. Now, culture believes that it's less financially risky to take out $20,000 to $30,000 a year in college loans for degrees like art or theater that won't bring in a lot of income, but they think it's less risky to do a proven method like natural family planning. In the same way that a fast car can convince a teenage boy that he's unstoppable, a latex lion has convinced our culture that we don't need to rely on God for family planning. So it's all about the mindset. Using contraceptives inadvertently encourages deism, which is the concept that God created the world and stepped back from it. Because we idolize human reason and advancement is enough, and there's no need for divine intervention when it comes to childbearing. Natural family planning is a physical representation of a spiritual ideology. It's a reflection of the openness and willingness we have for God's plan for marriage. Disillusionment creates the belief that intercourse outside of marriage can be acceptable without any ramifications. Now we know this isn't true because in 2010 there was a study done by Human Life International, and it says that those that use natural family planning above birth control are less likely to cheat on their spouses, less likely to engage in premarital sex, have considerably more sex each month, have an average divorce rate of 0.2%, report deeper intimacy, less likely to have abortions, and have higher moral views. So there's a lot of lies about contraceptives in our culture, and one of them is that it will decrease the amount of unwanted or unplanned pregnancies. Now we know this isn't true because from 1973 to 2011 there were 53 million abortions recorded. So natural family planning offers freedom from a lot of the health effects surrounding contraceptives, like headaches, liver problems, blood clots, etc. Now, people care about the chemicals that are in chicken and GMO and all that, but they have no idea of a lot of the chemicals that they put in their body that are in contraceptives. And this is a prime example that we live in a by all means necessary mentality. We take a pill to make a problem go away without considering all of the factors. In a recent study in The Atlantic, it says that people aren't getting married now until around 27 or 29 years old, which tell us that they're not having children until their 30s. This is another indicator of the me-centered mentality that we don't want children and we're going to push it off until later. And I challenge that because is it so much that children are becoming so much more expensive that we really can't afford it, or is the standard living of our houses becoming so much larger that we want to keep upgrading before we have children? So our lives need to look different than non-believers. Selfishness of wanting material things needs to separate. So solvency. Both methods of natural family planning are both safe and effective. The symptothermometer, to reiterate, track your temperature and calculate the mucus, as well as the creatine model, which now they have applications for on your phone, for Android and Apple. You can check your calendar daily for that. By choosing natural family planning, there's a greater relationship with your spouse. You have deeper intimacy without inhibitors, communicating on a deeper level. You have a shared struggle together. There are no moral or ethical implications surrounding contraceptives. There are no health effects. You have a greater understanding of the woman's body. By not choosing natural family planning, in contrast, you can hinder the communication. There's a lack of understanding of the hormonal symptoms surrounding her. Rather than uniting, in a sense, it separates because of those issues. The responsibility of planning the family falls only on the wife. There's a continued struggle with health symptoms, and this could range from headaches and discomfort all the way to liver problems. Natural family planning is best because couples can honor God with their bodies. It lets both of them make a joint decision each month of if they want to have children or not. Whereas contraceptives create a lack of trust in God's sovereignty. They distort the organic design of true naked sex. It encourages couples to purposely ignore a lot of the health issues surrounding contraceptives purely out of convenience. And it permits the redefining of the family unit because Christians' lives are the same as non-believers. I believe natural family planning is a wise and safe option as to avoid a lot of the health and ethical issues surrounding contraceptives. Thank you.